So I'm here with writer, empath, and acclaimed channel, Paul Selig, and he's here to talk about his most recent channeled book, Alchemy. This book is the seventh in a series of channeled material described as a program for personal and planetary evolution as humankind awakens to its own divine nature. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's so good to have you back. And you're now on Maui. And you're reunited with your puppy.
I am with Lily.
Lily.
May make an appearance at some point.
Oh, good. I saw it on Facebook. I was so happy to see your social media. Yeah. And the last time we spoke was about 18 months ago. It was about a year and a half ago. And you were talking about, the guides were talking about this thing that was coming. There was this very predictive nature that this big thing was coming, and it was a change, and we weren't going to be able to turn back from it. It was a little bit ominous, and now it's here, it seems.
Yeah. God, I'd love to hear that. There's a couple of people who posted things like Paul Selig's guides predicted. I'm going, I don't remember any of this because, I don't do scary predictions, but they've been known to say, get ready, buckle your seatbelts, everything's about to change. So perhaps that's what it was. But yes, everything did change since we last spoke.
Yes. And how are you navigating all of that change?
Well, it's funny. I'm extraordinarily grateful at this moment in my life. I was channeling at a retreat in Costa Rica last March, and New York City shut down essentially due to COVID while I was there, and I wasn't able to go home. And I had a friend who happened to be on Maui with his family and found me a little tiny house to stay in and sent me a plane itinerary. And I got on a plane to a place I'd never been before and found myself embarking on a completely new life, which I hadn't planned on, expected, or even sort of thought was as necessary as it turned out to be. So it's been a fascinating period of really having to let go of most ideas of who I thought I was and how to operate in the world that I know. And I've been a New Yorker pretty much my whole life. I don't even know how to drive. I'm living in the rainforest now without a car. I mean, it's completely crazy, but I'm quite content, I have to say, at the moment. So it's been a challenging time, certainly. I mean, as it has been for everybody. I'm fortunate that my work, translates quite well to an online forum. I'd been doing workshops virtually before COVID. We just sort of moved everything over. So I've been able to continue. But I found it a fascinating period. The guides, I've been here now 11 months on Maui, and the guides dictated a whole new book somewhere in the summer, which will be out in August. I'm just reading it now for the first time. I really didn't even want to look at it. So it was transcribed and sent to the publisher without my really having gone through the material, because it was just too much between everything that was going on in the world and and all of their commentary on it, the guide's commentary. It was kind of like enough already. But so I've been in a good period through this, and grateful to be where I am, and and at the same time very aware that I'm not exempt from anything. Anything can happen. And I've been told through this time, and even before this time, because my world started rocking a couple of months before COVID, maybe even before that, through the dictation of Alchemy, which was not a fun process. I kept hearing, and it's in the book Alchemy, that, this idea of befriending the unknown, allowing the unknown to be a realm of possibilities and not a realm of terror, which is where I would know. That's my default, is let's go get scared, let's just worry about something that we can't control. Right. So anyway, yes, that's how I'm faring. Thank you for asking.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes, you are living proof of fasten your seatbelts and everything's going to change and it's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
We're all living it.
Yeah.
And the title of the book, Alchemy, is a provocative title. And what is it referring to?
Well, I suspect, the guides just dictate so much that I'm sure they define everything at different times, and I forget some of them unless I hear them again and again. But what they're really talking about is the re-seeing and the re-knowing and reclaiming of reality as we've justified it through our sort of collective agreement to what should be. And the guides talk about lifting to a place, they call it the upper room. It's a level of consciousness or vibration and tone. And they say from this place, everything can and will be re-seen or made new. And it's aligning to that so that what you can do, or what one can do, is reclaim the inherent divinity that's been denied in the manifest world. And in that act of reclamation, they say a world is made new. So the act of alchemy or the alchemist is actually translating or transposing from one level of vibration to another, to a place of reclamation.
And it's so the upper room, you've talked about quite a bit in your previous book and this book.
Yep.
And so we're transitioning to that, or have the opportunity to transition to that.
That's how I hear it. The guides I work with I think they've used the word dimension maybe 3 times in 9 books now. It's not a word I hear, but they do talk about octaves of music. And they say any song can be sung at a higher octave. You just have to transpose it to be played in the higher key. And they say, the upper room, is a level of vibration that's always present, but that we've not been in adherence to, primarily because we have this enormous investment in what we were born into and how it should be known. And they say, we're taught how to experience a world, and we're taught to what to give value to. And most of this is cultural, and all of it, they say, is historical. So they've actually said, it's like we're born into the pool that somebody already peed in, and then we think that that's all you get, know? Yeah. So this idea of sort of lifting to the higher is to a level of agreement or consciousness that they say is available, always has been, but we, through our own investment in separation, have denied.
You've talked about, and the guides have talked about us, we as a collective and also as a country having karma.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been talking about this a long time, although I don't, karma is a word they've begun using a bit more.
Yeah.
Because it's so loaded, but they really just explain it as cause and effect.
Right.
And not punishment. It's just, you turn on the water, the faucet, the water is going to come out. It's cause and effect. But they said back in the very first book that was dictated through me in 2009, it was called I Am the Word. They said humanity is at a time of, I don't remember what the word was that they use. There's too many RE words. Basically, humanity is at a time of having to sort of reckoning. That was the word, reckoning. And they said a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations, and that everything that's been created or wrought or made in fear needs to be reknown or reclaimed in a higher way, which is really what they're teaching now in alchemy. I mean, it only took them, 8 more books to get to sort of how this happens. But I suspect had they tried to get that in earlier, I wouldn't have been able to bring it through. It would have been too far out for me, and I would have, clamped down a bit. I mean, this is a progressive teaching. But the idea of a country or a community having karma, it's not just an individual self. It's also who we believe ourselves to be, and the entitlement that we've had, and how we've invested in the suffering of others, and all of those things. that I guess are sort of coming forward to be re-seen, because they say nothing gets changed until it's first seen for what it is. We don't get to bypass. We don't get to say, well, I don't want to look at this, so I won't. Basically, you get to see it so that you can bring the light to it. They say, what you put in darkness, who you put in darkness calls you to the darkness. It's really simple. What you damn damns you back. And so the idea of reclamation is the willingness to re-see in order to transform. And I think we've all been in that place and continue to be, and probably will be, I would suspect, for some time.
Yes, yes. And this idea of, what you damns you back, and this idea of reckoning, it sounds kind of intense, but it really is a looking at how you've looked at things, right? And owning that. And so I've heard you talk about we're meeting the shadow. It's kind of Jungian in a way, looking at what's in our shadow selves, and that this is all part of that process of that we're engaged in this transitioning, individually and collectively.
And I think one of the challenges that people encounter and want to miss is that this isn't, the idea of coming into consciousness isn't just a solitary act. It's been one of the apt criticisms of the New Age. I create my own reality. Well, yes, but your choices are also informing everything else and everybody else around you. So, when they started teaching that stuff, I remember them saying, they said, it's not that you created the war in the Middle East, but because you see it, you're aligned to it, which means your consciousness is informing what you see.
Right.
And how you hold anything in consciousness claims the thing is what it is, which is it's vibrational accord. So the whole thing is we're in accord with everything we see individually and collectively.
Right.
And so the purpose of the individual lifting is to support the reclamation of everything else, not a solitary act.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting, just in you bringing up, what we see, we align to, and what's happening on a cultural level for us, particularly in this country, but I think not only in this country, just starting with media and how we've lost, the truth has really become distorted in all of these ways. And I'm wondering if you have any insight into how that's playing out, or what the guides think of that.
I don't know what they think of that. They wrote a book, though. They dictated a book called The Book of Truth.
Yes.
It was dictated right before the presidential election that Trump was elected in. And it's a really interesting book. And I haven't revisited it, but it's a challenging book.
Yeah.
But one of the things they talk about is that truth is not malleable. It is not subjective. And I think we've moved into a belief that truth is subjective. People say my truth or our truth. And if you watch this network, you get one version of truth, another. And that's just the lens that things are seen and interpreted through. So the guides that I work with, they say, what is true is always true. And so I can say, at this moment, in this idea of time that we share, in this reality that we know ourselves in, you and I are always having this conversation. It's always true that we're speaking at this time. It may not always be true that we're speaking.
Yeah.
And when they talk about truth, they're actually trying, I think, to bring us to the idea of the fundamental truth, which they speak of as the inherent divine. So they say there's one note being sung in the entire universe, one note played, and that one note is in articulation as all manifestation. God is the lamppost, God is the woman, God is the infant, God is everything seen as an articulation of this one note. And so when they talk about reclamation, they talk about reclaiming the inherent divine. They've actually said a lot in the last year that the only real problem humanity faces is what they call the denial of the divine. That's it. Everything can be brought right to that.
Yeah.
And the idea that what you damns you back, or aligns you to that level of fear, or whatever you want to call it, and what you blesses you in return, is a very simple way of understanding this. And they say all a blessing is a realization of the presence of the divine. That's it. Real thing. It has real ramifications.
Yeah. Well, while I'm going to keep you here for just a second on sort of contemporary events, and
Sure.
to just get your take and the perspective from what you're channeling. COVID, the pandemic.
They've talked about it, and I don't remember everything. There's a few lectures, and they're published. They're up online, that were delivered early in the pandemic, where they talked about it still as opportunity, opportunity to re-know ourselves. And they also spoke about it as the first unifying event that the planet really has had to partake in. And that at that level, it had ramifications that were enormous. But they talk about the ramifications always as potential, and the potential that we may attend to. They're not, I'm a New Yorker, that's where I was born and bred. There was a truck 3 blocks from my house outside the old St. Vincent Hospital where they were, stockpiling the bodies. I mean, it was an awful period, back in March, in the city. And, I'm not sort of glossing over anything here, and I don't think that they say what a wonderful thing is happening, but I do think that how we attend to anything and how we perceive it as potential opportunity for growth can really be in support of magnificent change. So, you'd have to go back to the lectures. I'm not going to ask them. Should I ask them now? No, I just got to know. I don't have to ask them right now.
Yeah.
So
that's helpful. And, I think that's helpful. And, what I find is, it's back to what you were saying about, what they've been teaching about embracing the unknown and being comfortable with the unknown. That, we can be scared of this, or we can be present with this. And, I think that it's an active practice to be present with it on a daily basis. And, and like you said, you moved to Maui, and,
and it's funny because I had just rented a new apartment in Manhattan, and it was like, I knew I didn't want to stay in New York, but if I was going to stay, I might as well live someplace nice for once. So I rented a place that I thought I would like to live in. Yeah. I've never spent a night there. I've never been there. It's, the lease is up in about 4 weeks. I'm very happy not to be paying that rent. But, it's what I thought I should have and the life I thought I should live. Yeah. And what was given to me was far better than what I would have chosen, through my own agenda. This wasn't anything that I would have done by choice. So I have to take one little pause because my little dog just walked out, and I've got to go get her back. So
we'll get Lily.
Traffic. Okay. One moment.
Great.
Stop my video for 1 sec.
Sure.
Lily.
Oh, what? Hold on, sorry. Oh, can you unmute? I muted you just so you could.
I'm good.
Have a conversation with Lily if you needed to.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So again, while we're here on these sort of contemporary events, our meeting was supposed to happen quite a few months ago, and interestingly, it's happened sort of at this critical time in transition of power, and after the Capitol riot. So I feel like just want to ask you if you have a hit or if you've gotten anything from the guides about any of this.
No, they don't. I mean, I'm not one of those guys that talks about current events. They've never, if somebody asks about something specific, I always say, oh, they're not going to take this. And then they do. I'm surprised. They often realize. I don't even know that they don't know the names of things. The guides often still call my computer a television. I mean, it's a little archaic, but I wasn't surprised, let me put it to you that way, in the least, because they've been talking about the action of fear, is to claim more fear. That's one of their primary teachings. And that this need for division and separation that they say the small self or personality structure has a great investment in maintaining the status quo. And even, at the cost of, a mess. But they've also talked about the dismantling of the old and what's really before us. And they've said in the last 3 books or so, they've been speaking to this, that basically everything that we've taken for granted, they used to use this example, you think there will always be a post office, because you're used to a post office. I lived in New York City and they were taking away the P.O. boxes in the old neighborhood, they were disappearing. Right. So, they said pretty much economic systems, religious systems, political systems, all of them are about to go.
Wow.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's anarchy and chaos. It means that we've outgrown certain things and that we don't get to have an experience of the new until we become willing to relinquish what was. And this time that we seem to be in of so much, coming to the surface, be it, systemic racism or all of these things that have been there and have been blithely ignored by a portion of the population, at least, they can't be ignored anymore. And what the guides started talking about in the Book of Truth, and again, this is just over 4 years ago that was dictated, they said what's about to happen is that everything that's been buried in the backyard is about to come up. And the purpose of that is not to go look at that terrible thing or blame that person, which is just basically then adding insult to injury and perpetuating separation and unforgiveness, which is their word. The idea is that everything needs to be seen in order to be reknown. Don't say, if you've got a dead body in the basement, eventually it's going to stink up the whole house. So the body's going to come up. And the body comes up so that you can attend to it. Now, how you attend to anything seems to be how you get what's next. So if I want to, for example, berate a child for being stupid, if I'm a teacher, I've perpetuated negativity. I learned when I was a college teacher, it's what I did for 25 years at NYU, that the way to teach was to teach to the brilliance of the student, even if it was unseen by them, even if they thought that they weren't too bright. You teach to the inherent brilliance, and they would flower. It was wonderful to see, but the same is true with the world, and we're so busy condemning and damning, and we're very good at it. And the guides talked about this too in a number of books. They said, you still want to see the execution in the town square. Yeah. You still want to gather for that. You just call the town square something different. And so that when it comes to this, they say things like self-righteousness is always the small self. Small self means the personality structure. And so that's a good reminder for me, because I can be on my high horse all the time, and it doesn't get me anywhere except I get knocked off the horse. So
yeah. Well, and it makes sense that we would have to see all of these things and own all of these things, including the divisiveness, including the places where truth is not, where we ourselves are condemning those we don't disagree with because they're so obviously bad, right? Yeah. So we have to own it on all of these levels. And so it's heartening to think of this as really a collective attuning to a higher level of consciousness
Mm-hmm.
And one question I have is, as we are shifting, as we're in this shift, are we actually progressing as a collective, or are there those who don't progress and who are left behind in some way? And what does that look like?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard this. I used to hear this kind of thing for years. People used to call into my live streams and say, well, I'm ascending, but I don't want to because my husband's going to be left here. And it just doesn't work this way. This isn't direct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not how I understand this. Yeah. I understand that we have free will.
Yes.
Free will not be overridden. That's a gift. Now, what we can do is align the higher will. We can align to the higher will. They call the guides, say you can braid the will so that you're actually moving into a level of agreement to the higher, which they say is always present and always available. But I'm going to ask them, do people get left behind? So when I do channel, I whisper the words and repeat. And there's people doing construction right outside my window. So we're going to have to sort of deal with that too. But let me see if I can do this. There's only one thing to say. No one is left behind. No one is left behind because that's not possible, Some will be realized. Some will be realized in this incarnation, Others will not. Others will not. So we're not a race to the finish. It's certainly not a race to the finish. You will learn no matter what you choose. You learn through your ordinary lives. You learn through your ordinary lives, your disciplines, your disagreements, and all of your choices, and all of your choices. This is all opportunity. This is all opportunity. Now, when you lift to the higher, how you choose is transformed. How you choose is transformed. And coming out of your life is, and consequently, the outcome of your life is to benefit not only you but others. Not only you, but others, those who stay in the lower strata. Those who stay in the lower strata will find their mirrors there, will find their mirrors there when we teach our students the kingdom. When we teach our students the kingdom or the realization of the manifest divine, we're offering a very different mirror. We are offering a very different mirror, your inherent divinity, the inherent divinity of others, and the inherent divinity of others is what is seen, period. Their sin, period.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And that too is very heartening and hopeful. It makes me think of a few things. One is this idea of, in Mahayana Buddhism, it's you are striving to evolve and to bring others along. It's like it's exactly that. It's not a race to the finish. It's not, you're right. You're in service and bringing and trying to help, not in an evangelical way, but in a collective way. And so, it makes me think of this term that is found in a lot of spiritual traditions and has found its way into our popular cultural language as well. And is also loaded, but the term enlightenment. Any thoughts on that?
The guides, but mostly they say that they're not teaching enlightenment. That's not the teaching. They're teaching realization. And they say realization is knowing, it's true knowing. So let me see if they want to address this. By the way, I'm in the rainforest in Maui and it just started raining.
So oh, great.
And it's quite beautiful, but it's loud.
Yeah,
so I may have to close the window. Let me just see the idea of enlightenment. The idea of enlightenment is what's problematic. You see it as an endpoint. There is no endpoint. There is no endpoint. There is evolving. You are always evolving. You still have a body. You still have a body. You have much to grow through. You have much to grow through. You have a body. And even without the body, there is much to grow through. There is much to grow through. It doesn't end. It doesn't end. The idea of enlightenment. The idea of enlightenment. I am done. I am done. I don't have to incarnate. I don't have to incarnate. It's the refuge for the one. It's the refuge for the one who is frightened of being, in a body, and in circumstance that are there to support, and to teach, period.
Thank you.
Say this. There's one thing they used to say once in a while in class and workshops. Somebody would raise their hand and would say, I just don't want to come back anymore. This has to be my last lifetime. And the guides would say, oh, good, then you get to come back.
Yeah.
And that's all you need.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear you get to come back until you. So.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me think too. Back to this idea of the shadow, things in the shadow. It's like enlightenment isn't the goal. Isn't where you arrive at. It's this constant shining of more and more light into the places within you that need it. Well, I want to ask a little bit of a provocative question, and if you don't want to answer it, you or the guides don't have to answer it. But I'm curious, what is the origin of the guides? What is their purpose? And are they on an evolutionary path?
Well, I get yes, and of course, and we've always been here, and we've always been here. So if that doesn't answer your question. So like if that doesn't answer your questions, like, is there anything more? They address this actually in the book that's coming out next. It's called Enlightenment. And it came from questions in a live stream. And I don't remember offhand what the answers were, but somebody asked about the pedagogy of the guides.
Yeah.
And they basically said, this is a teaching that's been present since before recorded time. Mm-hmm. And, and it's always being offered in different language, in a different way. And, this is something that's happened before. This isn't the first time we've been at this kind of a juncture. So let me see if they want to say anything about, where it comes from. We would like to say only one thing. We would like to say only one thing. Your idea of time is misguided. Your idea of time is misguided. You are still operating. You are still operating in linearity, and you wish to place us in a sequence. And you wish to place us in a sequence. The language we work with Paul. The language we work with through Paul is in order, one word after the next, one word after the next. The teachings are actually continuous. The teachings are actually continuous, or we parse them out, although we parse them out with reason, in order you understand, in order you may understand, to actually dive into this teaching. To actually dive into this teaching, to be encompassed by it is to know eternity, is to know eternity. Is a teaching of eternity. It is a teaching of eternity. Finally, and all language can do. And all language can do is support the student, even though language itself diminishes the intent, because the absolute cannot be named, Now, who and what we are in authorship of our texts. In authorship of our text is Melchizedek, and that is the name we say. And that is the name we say. It is inclusive of many teachings. It is inclusive of many teachings and a way of being, beyond time and beyond lineage, and beyond lineage, as you would describe it, because lineage itself, while helpful to some to understand, also implies order and sequence. And when one is eternal, and when one is eternal, when we are eternal, or when we are eternal, we may show up at any time. We may show up at any time, teach in any time, teach in any time, and through a different language, if that is what is required. If that is what is required, we exist beyond time, but we exist beyond time, although you may know us through it. Paul interrupts. Where does the teaching come from? The teaching doesn't come from anything. The teaching doesn't come from anything. It is what it always has been. It is what has always been and always will be and always will be. And to give that language, if you wish to know, is to claim you each, as of it, and in worth of it, This is the teaching of the truth. This is the teaching of the truth beyond religion, and in fact, the genesis of all religions. And in fact, the genesis of all religions is present in what we teach, is present in what we teach. It has always been, will always be so. It has always been, always be so. It will always be so, period. Period.
Thank you. Thank you to the guides, and thank you for channeling that. It was very helpful. And anything that you wanted to say about that?
I'm really uninvested at this point. Mm-hmm. The name Melchizedek was a name I was told by someone who was working with me years ago, who said, this is who you're working with. And I was like, because I've never been very interested in the names.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm not interested in the names is because of perceived hierarchy and a kind of egotism that can be attached to them. So occasionally I'll meet somebody and they'll say, "Hi, I'm a channel for," and they'll list 27 entities. And I'm going, "Oh my God, I have a hard enough time with the one." But it's almost like, here's the talent roster,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to hear Raphael or, Mary Magdalene today. That's it's just not how I work.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the need for the names. I do. And I do think it's important for people who are doing this kind of work to know who they're listening to.
Mm-hmm.
They're called the guides because when my ex found out I could do this years ago, because I kept it a secret because I didn't want somebody running from the room thinking I was completely nuts. When my ex found out I could do this, he used to say, "Ask the guides this, ask the guides that." That's how they got to be called the guides. When they've never complained about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard early on in my 30s, the first name I heard for the guide was the priest, and then I heard the high priest, and that was the Melchizedek. It was the high priest of Jerusalem, and it's an order, it's a priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
And I can accept it at that level, that this is an ongoing teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a collective that I work with. And if that's what they want to call themselves, this is what they say. If you wish to call us something, you may call us this. And that's like, okay, that's it. Yeah. But it's not what I put my focus on. My job, as best I can do it, is to show up and be a clear conduit for what wants to come through. And what comes through isn't really my business. And if I have a hard time with it, I contest it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then Paul was interrupting. It's like, I don't write the books, but my name's on the cover. Mm-hmm. So I feel a little bit of a sense of responsibility for something that could be misleading or, mm-hmm. God forbid, harmful. Mm-hmm. So I've done that from the beginning. And mm-hmm. they always respond, pretty much always. Sometimes they'll say, "We'll attend to this question later," but they always do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well, what my just a takeaway from that is that this is part of what is. And, our kind of human brain wants to organize it in a certain way and put it in a lineage and give it words and put it in, but they're part of, it's this larger ongoing thing that we tap into.
Yeah. I suspect it's like, the guides say that we're all radios. I work sort of more obviously as a radio because I'm a channel and I'm playing different stations. And right now you're talking to Paul, and when I just turn the dial, you can get the guides, Right. And, you turn the dial and you can be in the upper room. You may not be able to maintain it because you keep wanting to turn the dial back to right. what we've known. But this is how it works. And I suspect if what they say is true, and at this point I believe it to be, I have no reason to say no. What is true is always true, which must mean that this information exists in some form, mm-hmm. In some other way. I'm on Maui now, and I wasn't all that familiar with Ram Dass's work before I came here, but a sort of a series of very odd events led me to his satsang and this little community of people who had cared for him when he was living at his house. And they become, friends. And I'm grateful for that connection. But, I have one friend that used to get me in his truck and he'd just play Ram Dass lectures. And I thought, oh, brother. But then I listened and he was saying what the guides were saying in a different way and quite wonderfully. I thought, oh, this is so much better. There's no whispering and repeating and funnier. And I thought, but then I thought, truth is truth. Right. Why not? So why shouldn't it be?
Right. And that's why we named our organization Sacred Stream. It's like, the stream is informing and it takes different shapes, and it may be a tree and a flower and a grass, but it's all informed from the kind of the same place. Well, one thing as the guides were offering that mm-hmm. Information and that teaching, strikes me to say, the way, I received that, and I think people experience, I don't want to speak for all people, but I think one of the things that for me is really remarkable about the channeling that you do is that there's, and you call it, you describe there are attunements occurring in the written word and also in the audio books and in your live teachings and workshops. And, for me, it's almost like the way I experience it is the words are almost, and I'm a writer and I'm a reader, and words really matter to me. And in your books, it's like the words it's way beyond the words. And so I actually like to listen to your audiobooks. And I just feel like I'm getting this whole.
You are.
Yeah.
The guys say the language in the books is encoded with vibration. And they say these are books that are experienced more so than read. And truthfully, it's a verbal dictation. There's no writing involved here.
Yeah.
So when you're reading the book, you're reading the transcription of a spoken lecture.
Yes.
And they've gotten much better, I think, over the years, because it's hard to tell at times that this was a spoken lecture because it feels so written and built.
Yeah.
Lectures at times are very ornate, and they'll hark back to concepts from prior teachings. So, but I like the audiobooks. I like to that's actually where I get to really experience the book myself, is in the booth, doing the reading, because then I really have to attend to every word. I've spoken it once, but when I'm channeling it, it comes so fast, I'm just trying to keep up with the dictation.
Yes.
So I'm just tired, and I'm retaining maybe a third of it. And occasionally I'll hear myself speak a word out of order or stumble something. And we can usually remedy that because it's on the recording, is the whisper. The whisper is usually accurate, and trying to keep up with it, and the repeat takes time. But yeah, the audiobooks hold the vibration. I tone there's toning in the books. They say Paul, the guides tone through Paul. First time I did that, out in Maui, we had to find a studio that was open during COVID to record Alchemy. I mean, the poor man in the booth, I just, this huge sound, had no idea what he was into, but that's how they work, and that's what happens.
Right. Well, for people who are not familiar with your work, who are listening today, just to say that the books, the words are excellent, but they make total sense. And it's remarkable because you don't edit them. There is no editing. It is straight dictation to book. And that's remarkable.
I was fortunate that my first editor for the first book agreed with me that nothing would be changed. And I've been fortunate to work with a publisher for all of the books, Joel Fotinos, who's now at St. Martin's Essentials, who agrees with that. So if I was with someplace else, they'd probably be rewriting paragraphs and it just, there's probably in any book maybe 3 words that are altered, and that's because I mispronounced them, and it's clear what the inherent meaning was. And there's in Alchemy, and it was funny, there's a word that I refused to speak because I didn't think it was a word. I didn't know the word, and I didn't want to get stuck because I knew it was a book dictation. And at the end of the lecture, the guide said, there is a word that Paul was refusing to say. And, and we're fine with that.
Yeah.
And as soon as the lecture was over, I blurted out, it was a penumbra to the classes. What was penumbra? And everybody got their phones out and was looking up penumbra, which is a word I know I have never used in a sentence in my life until that day. And penumbra means the light that shines from behind a cloud. It was the perfect word for the entire chapter. So it's a footnote. The word was penumbra, landed as a footnote. But
fascinating.
Yeah, but I didn't know what it meant. So
right. Well, and the other thing that's really that we miss with you right now is that you're not in person, and it's wonderful. Your online events are very powerful. And we miss, I don't know if you have plans to return to touring.
Well, it's, when it feels better, I will go back, but probably not the way that I was. I was channeling 3 weekends a month and flying all over the place and sometimes staying on the road. And I enjoyed that. But the wear and tear was hard.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that we can reach more people this way, and it costs much less because we're not renting. It's not plane tickets and hotel rooms and shipping equipment and all, the ballroom at the Sheraton to get, all that stuff. It's easier to do. So I'll do it. I look forward to it. I miss the live events, but I'm going to hopefully do them on Maui.
Great.
Because why not? So if you want to come, we'll do things here.
That's great. That's great. And you said you finished the next book, and I didn't catch the title of that.
The title is The Kingdom.
The Kingdom.
It will be out in August.
Okay.
St. Martin's.
Great. And you have a couple of so online, paulselig.com, you have your online events, and people can join you there. And you have some things coming up. We may be on after those events, but I'm going to post them all on the.
There's always something going on. So if you go to the website, I try to do a 5-day intensive every month, and then most Wednesday evenings I'm channeling, and those are the ongoing things. So you can find out what's new there. It's just on my website, paulselig.com.
Really exciting. And any last thoughts as we wrap up?
No, I don't. I mean, right now I feel like I don't know anything anymore. I really don't, and I'm happy about that. It's a bit of a relief for the moment. Yeah. And I'm living in a house that's under construction, and I'm even finding that I can enjoy that some days. It's all new. What can I say? So
yeah. Oh, well, it's so lovely to see you and to reconnect. And as I said, I'm so happy that Lily's there with you and that you're in a rainforest. What a great place to be.
Why not?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'll look forward to the next book and connecting again. Okay. Take care, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.